Now, a question I get asked all the time is, when you've got creases in the front of your shoes, how do you get them out? Because it's an age-old problem, everybody has it, and can you turn them into that? Well, today I'm going to show you how to do it using a technique that is very controversial. I'll tell you why in a second, because it uses heat and moisture, two things that leather doesn't typically like. So the first thing to say is this technique is not to be used for regular shoe maintenance because it will weaken, damage the leather over time. So this is a one-off process to use in an emergency, or if you want to do a restoration on a pair of shoes, or if you're thinking of throwing a pair of shoes away and you want to give them one last chance at a breath of life, try this, because it works very well, but it can damage the leather. So with that in mind, we're going to get cracking. I'm going to use Renovateur. You can also, that's again quite an expensive product from Saphir. You can use acetone, much cheaper, much more readily available. I'm going to use Saphir Renovateur. Again, you can use mink oil or leather balm, and Saphir Medi D'Or shoe cream. That one's the dark brown. Now, you may recognize these shoes as ones that I did a restoration on a few months ago. I got them on eBay very cheaply. These are Red Wing boots, and they were covered in paint. I did a full restoration. I removed the paint, stripped them back to the bare leather and built them up. And since then, they've been basically my daily wearers. They've been my day-to-day shoes. So, as happens with daily wearers, you don't always put your shoe trees in, you don't always treat them particularly well because you just put them on for nipping to the shops or put them on for going to the pub. They're everyday shoes, so they need a bit of help. So what I'm going to do, as I say, I've done this one and I'm going to show you exactly how I did it. Now the controversial part is we're going to use a steam iron to remove the creases. So as you can see, that's the starting point. And as you can see, a very deep and dried in crease just behind the toe cap. And that's the main flexing point of the shoe. So it's understandable to get a crease there. As I say, the controversial part of this process is that we're going to use a steam iron. You can use a standard steam iron that you use for your shirts. However, I'm going to use this. It's a portable handheld steamer, which has a sole plate on it, the same as a steam iron, so it generates heat through the steam, but also through the sole plate, and that's what we're going to use to press out the creases. So while that warms up, I'm going to prepare the shoe. Now take the laces out, shoe tree in. And that pushes out a lot of the creases, but as you can see, the leather itself is still badly creased. So, the first thing we're going to do is get some steam going on the leather to soften it up. And there we are. The good thing about the portable steam generator is you can just switch the steam on and off at will, so it's really handy for that. Then I'm going to take my microfiber cloth and just wipe off the moisture. What we're doing here is trying to get some moisture into the leather to make it easier to work with. Now, you don't want the sole plate of the iron directly onto the leather. You always need something protecting in between. And so this is, as I say, this is, we'll put the steam back on. And I'm going to use a cotton cloth, doubling it over, and put it over the front of the shoe. Now, put it over the front of the shoe, take the iron, and literally iron the creases out of the front of the shoe. Now, you want to be checking this every few seconds. As you can see, just with one very quick pass, that's already started taking these creases out very effectively. Now, part of the reason that you don't want the sole plate to come into contact with the leather is obviously it's going to melt the wax polish from the shoe, and it's going to make a mess of your iron. So what this will do is it will take the wax off, and that's going to end up in the cloth, which is fine. That's a sacrificial cloth that can be re-washed and reused, not a problem. And that, as you can see, that's only been a few seconds of work, and already the creases are largely out. And we can do the same thing on the tongue of the shoe as well. And there we are. I'm just going to do one more pass while we're here. One more pass. As a recommendation, I would say do as few passes as possible, because the more you do, the more you're going to damage the leather, or potentially damage the leather. So do as few as you can get away with. Steam off. And again, let's just have a look at that. So I hope it comes across on the camera, because those creases that were dried in are completely gone. Now, the secret to this working is what we're going to do next, which is condition the leather. That process is quite traumatic for the leather, which is why we now want to give it a bit of TLC. So the first thing I'm going to do is Renovateur. This is to basically clean off any residual polish that's on the leather. Again, just a finger's worth on the end of a cloth, and this is then to clean it. And that brings off the residual polish from the shoe. So that's where we are. It's now a very clean but very dull looking brown. So a long way to go to get to that, but that's where we're heading next. So the next thing we want to do is give it some Renovateur. This is basically this has got mink oil in, plus conditioners and waxes that are going to give some real deep conditioning to the leather. And as I've said before, you can use a cloth. I like to use fingers directly on the leather. Now, when you use Renovateur, it gives a bit of a false impression of how good the leather now is, because it's dark, it's rich, it gives the nice colour to it. But once that is fully absorbed, it then goes lighter and drier looking, but it does still retain a lot of that conditioning. So that's the Renovateur. All we're going to do just give it a brush all over. This removes any excess product and distributes the Renovateur evenly over the surface of the leather. Okay, so that's that process done. Now we need to leave that for an hour or so to absorb in fully, and then we can do the final process, which is the shoe cream, the Médaille d'Or, which I've chosen a dark brown for. Now, when I first restored these shoes, I used a very deep red colour, which was lovely, and I'm just changing the colour. You can use whatever colour you want, but I'm deciding this time to change the colour as I'm doing this and to go for a nice deep marron foncé, as they call it, dark brown. And that's going to be the same. So come back in an hour and let's have a look. So that's been about an hour, and as you can see, the creases are nicely faded away. The leather's looking dull, but that's what we're going to deal with next, using the Sophia Médaille d'Or shoe cream. Just going to go straight in with my hands on this one, starting at the toes. Now with these shoes, boots, obviously they've got a cream rubber sole on them. So you have to be quite careful with a dark shoe cream or a wax polish not to get it on the cream rubber. That's going to be another video of how I get the sole clean. There's also the elephant in the room, which you may have noticed, is the damage. It's actually worn away. It's a hole. I'm going to glue that back. It's just they need to be resoled professionally. I'm not a cobbler, and I don't have the equipment or the expertise to repair or resole shoes. So that's a job for somebody else. But in the meantime, I can patch it up with a bit of contact adhesive and just patch the hole. But this video is all about trying to get the creases out. And if you, once you've done the technique with one pair, you get a bit of confidence with it, it'll work with basically any decent pair of leather shoes. So what I'm trying to do here is get the shoe cream. This is why using the fingers is a great idea, because you can get right in, right up to the welt without, and you know where you are. You're not going to overspill. If you're using a cloth or a brush, there's sometimes the risk of overspill onto the sole, which isn't normally a problem when you've got a dark coloured leather sole or a grey sole or something like that. That's not going to show up the overspill. But when it's a cream rubber like this, you want to be quite careful. Right, that's pretty good. Now I'm going to just clean my hands. It's obviously just using one coat of the shoe cream. Again, it's not strictly speaking a video about how to clean and polish shoes. It's more about removing the creases and how they look afterwards. You can obviously go back in with some wax polish, so another layer of the shoe cream. You could put some clear wax polish on to give it more of a shine. But this is just to demonstrate what's possible just with a handful of basic products. And it's more the technique that I wanted to get across with this. Now, this could be a video in its own right, but how do you polish the toes of a shoe when you can't get your hand inside because of the shoe tree? Obviously you can do this around the edge. You can hold the sole of the shoe and do this, which is what most people will do. But if, like me, you want instant results, I use the thigh technique. The thigh technique is basically clamp the shoe in between your thighs and use the full length of the cloth to polish the toe of the shoe. Get the cloth as wide as you can to cover the whole of the shoe. So when I'm relacing the shoes with the shoe trees in, I'll tighten them just a little bit and tie the laces. And what that does is that's going to mold the laces and that area of the shoe to give it a good shape around the shoe tree. So there we are. That's your pair of shoes that had really quite bad dried in creases on the toes. Hope you can see the benefit that that's had. As I said at the start, it's not a great idea to do it on a regular basis. It's really a one-off exercise to remove the creases. If you decide that you're going to start looking after them and using a shoe conditioner, a leather conditioner, and shoe trees when you take them off, that's a good starting point for your new shoe care regime. Anyway, if you have any questions, comments, criticisms about my technique, as you always do, fire them into the comments. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Till next time, take care. I'll see you very soon.